Thank you ever so much, everyone, for coming. I had a couple of texts this morning being like, why the hell am I getting up this early for you? It's a fair point. I think we'll do a brunch next time. I was pouring hot water over the car door trying to get into the car this morning because it was bloody cold. So I do really appreciate everyone making the effort and coming in, and I hope that the bacon sarnies and coffee are recompense for that early journey. I'm Paddy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dex. And today with Ashby, we're really delighted to host a fantastic panel of people and a fantastic audience of talent leaders. I don't know what the collective noun for a group of talent leaders is. Is it a gaggle? Write in if you have a good idea. Maybe it's a process or a panel of talent leaders. But really delighted to have everyone here. And the topic for today that we want to discuss is really what does 2026 hold for talent? What does it hold for the businesses that we support, the teams that we lead, and ultimately the segment of the businesses that we look after, which is ultimately bringing awesome people into our companies. I think it's a topic and a space that's obviously been dominated by AI, but there are other themes and currents in there, and really wanted to bring everyone together today to discuss that, to share learnings, to hear from some fantastic companies and from some fantastic vantage points in the market, so that together we can learn and be prepared for the year. A little bit on Dex and a little bit on sort of that. I stepped away from my previous role at Atomico around this time last year to found Dex, and really the motivation behind that was that I've spent more than a decade as a talent leader working in startups and scale-ups, and have always been frustrated by what I saw as the inefficiencies and the kind of like the broken parts of our industry. And I got really, really tired of people who've never done a day's recruiting in their life building recruitment tech companies. I just got really tired of being told that, that we need someone else to do it for us, and decided actually it was time for somebody that's actually done some recruitment to have a go. And so we've been building Dex for about a year. We're delighted to work with many of the companies in this room and many that aren't here with us today. And ultimately our mission is to help connect the very best engineers with the very best companies, to connect the best talent with the opportunities that deserve them. And that's really our mission, that's really our objective. We believe that finding a great role, finding a great opportunity is one of the most important, impactful things you can do in your life. Where you choose to work, what you do with your time is one of the most important decisions you make in your life. And most people today make that decision with very little information, with very little support. I think I don't know how many people in this room, chose recruiting as an industry or fell into it. I certainly fell into it, and I'm glad I did. But I think that's true for most people, and I think we can do better than that now. So that's a little bit about Dex. That's a little bit about me. Want to bring Willem up to introduce himself, and obviously our great partners in Ashby, and then we'll hand over to the panel to introduce themselves. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Paddy. Hey, everyone, I'm Willem. I'm on the Ashby founding team. Super excited for you all to be here. If you haven't heard about Ashby yet, talk to your neighbor. They're probably an Ashby customer. I want to thank Charles. Thank you so much for coming. I know that you're spending a lot of...
You tricked me.
Yeah, I tricked you a little bit.
He was like, this is a small event, just come in. It's actually much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's a small head of TA event, but like super helpful. Or thank you for coming all the way. I know you spent a lot of time in Stockholm. Jonathan, also thank you. These are two of my favorite customers, obviously, and also Zoe. Thank you for being here as well. Really excited to what you got to hear. I've got a little gift for you all. If you got cold, it's an Ashby signature blanket. Our designer is actually a clothing designer.
Oh, nice.
And he built this specifically for the people that do the good work, including you, Paddy. So yeah, really, really excited about this panel. Thank you all for coming, and nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much. And I'll just allow you guys to introduce yourselves, because I will definitely not do as good a job. But three fantastic panelists today. Charles, if you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Charles. I'm heading talent at Lovable. I pretend to know what I do every day. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is actually very serious. I really don't know what I'm doing in my job, mostly because I feel like the job is changing quite a bit. I'm from France. I have a very thick accent, so I try to speak slowly today. And that's about it. Moving to Stockholm. Super excited to discover that new city, that new country. And over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm John. I'm head of talent at Synthesia. I'm not French, as you can guess. I'm from London, much more boring. I've been at Synthesia for just under a year. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time sharing a panel with you two, and I've heard a lot about you both. I'm very excited. So yeah, nice to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe. I lead talent at Sequoia in Europe, and I'm also from London. I've spent the last 13 or 14 years in a venture capital talent role. So previously at EQT Ventures as a talent partner, and then I was first employed at a company called Entrepreneur First. And I basically spend my days trying to meet and find outliers and connecting them to opportunity. So a lot of synergy with what Dex is trying to do.
Thank you, everyone. And so I think we have on the next slide over there, we're using Slido. So if there are questions that pop up in your mind midway through, you can text them in, and then we'll look to address those towards the end, okay? We're going to do about half an hour of chatting through some questions here, and then we've got plenty of time for Q&A, and then there's obviously a breakout afterwards, which you're more than welcome to stay for as long as you please and chat with every and anyone. First question today, and really this is for all of you, and would great to hear from each of you on this, but what is the number one challenge, if there is such a thing, facing you in your role today? Yeah.
I'm happy to go first. Moving fast enough. This is literally, I've never seen anything like this. And by moving fast enough is I think we think about every talent on the market as an opportunity to capture. And we think that every company that's here is competition. And so if we can move fast enough, we can capture the talent and make sure that we have them before any of the competitors get it. And so I think in our job, in our function, the number one challenge that we face is like, how can we move fast enough while having a quality control and making sure that the hires are actually good? And then obviously after that, you sort of have the challenges of the culture and like, how is the company going to scale and is it going to work long term? But who can we beat is basically the challenge. Is like, who can we beat on the market to move fast enough? And I know we'll talk about this later, but like one big challenge that we're facing is we actually basically doing acqui-hire a lot earlier now in like sort of like the development of a company. So you see acqui-hires happening at like seed or Series A, which is like totally new versus what used to happen where company needed to be at like Series D and pre-IPO to do acqui-hires. So that would be the number one challenge that we're facing.
In the interest of not just agreeing with what you're saying, although I do, and offering something different, I think the competition now is kind of crazy. In the last year, we've probably seen competition for talent get harder and harder and harder. Most of the candidates that we're seeing that we get to final stages, probably across all roles, but especially actually engineering now, which is quite interesting, they all have like 5 or 6 offers from other companies, and they're all super high. And I think it's become the norm where you hear a candidate have an offer for like 3, 4, 500K, something along those lines, as a total comp. And it's really hard not to over-index and over-influence yourself based on that. Oh, everybody else is doing this, so we need to make our salary bandings ridiculous. And I think it's really, really difficult to know like where the bar is and how to set what that competition is. And I think the thing we've learned is just be really clear on what your value proposition is. Like, what are you indexing for? Is it really high salary and you expect really high performance? Is it the culture? Whatever it may be. So I think that's an ever-increasing challenge in the market. We'll see that get worse and worse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the competition for the top 1% of talent, which is what the echelon that Sequoia companies and other companies are going after, is just, it's fundamentally shifted in the last 12 to 18 months especially. And I think I'm hearing what you're saying about competition from other companies, but actually my biggest problem is competition from other career paths or other opportunities that are not just the startup down the road or the big AI lab down the road. And so I think what we're seeing is that for the most ambitious people, they're no longer pursuing linearity in their career, they're pursuing agency. AI has massively increased individual leverage, and so actually the opportunity set that the exceptional talent have has just expanded by tenfold in the last year. I think for the most ambitious people I'm speaking to and spending time with, they're not just considering one path or one track or one offer. It's like a multitude of things. It's like they might go and found a company, they might go and join a company, they might join a fund, they might start a fund, they might take an opportunity outside of tech. And so I think the second order effect of that is made it super hard for founders and teams to recruit, because it's not just apples for apples competition anymore. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing. And if I can add a second one, the other biggest thing that is challenging at the moment is finding great people in talent. So I think this room is very relevant.
I think hiring recruiters is basically one of the hardest things. It's like recruiters make the absolute worst candidates in the same way doctors make bad patients. I think I echo what you guys say. I think, obviously it's interesting. We have a really interesting snapshot here, obviously, so from the VC world, Synthesia, how many people are you now?
Nearly 600.
Nearly 600. And Lovable, how big are you guys now?
Including contractors, close to 300.
Okay, so it really interesting. And then we're here at Dex, we're 10 people now. So we've got a really interesting cross-section. And obviously, I worked in talent for a while and in the VC piece before. I have never seen a market move as quickly as it moves right now. It's reminiscent to what I remember, when I opened offices in San Francisco. It was more reminiscent of that than it is of London. We've got clients on the books at Dex who in the past 12 months have doubled their salary bands. And they started at 100. Right, so it's not as though we're seeing small shifts. We're seeing massive leaps to compete for talent. And interesting at the same time, what I'm seeing is actually the profile of what people want is actually getting narrower, not broader. I think we went through a period of time where companies were more open to slightly more divergent backgrounds and experiences now. But I think at the very top of the market, the expectation, the brief that we get on a daily basis is, I want someone who's been a founder, that has been through something like an EF or a fill in the blank or a YC, that has founded something as a great engineer, as a 10x engineer, and wants to come here and do this. Everyone wants that. There are probably less than 150 of those people that are able to get, and so it's become very concentrated on a very small number of people. The offers have gone crazy, and the reality is that processes are concluding within 3 or 4 days, and so it's an interesting moment. Moving on slightly, just to talk about sort of volume. Actually, across the board, I think we're all seeing application volume at all-time highs. I remember seeing this very early at Atomico. I was having portfolio companies come to me and say, "Hey, we've posted a role. We normally get like a dozen applications for that, and we've had 400 this weekend. Like, what's going on?" And I sort of started to hear that and was like, "That's weird." Does that increase in volume make it easier to hire? Are we finding that's a good thing to have? Like, what are the experiences of the panel?
No, is what I'd say. We had last year about 70,000 applications for 200 roles, and my team didn't have enough time to go through all of those applications. It was really, really difficult. And in an ideal world, you'd spend a good few minutes every application, and you'd be able to take your time. But it's a really, really hard thing to do right now. The variance in quality is also massive. We specifically have been trying to work through, like, what does good even look like? So everybody has a slightly different profile of what's the top 1% of talent that you're looking for in the market. So I think it's really important for every company to get to a place where you're clearly defining what that looks like across the board, because it will be very different. It's been very different in all the companies I've worked at as well, of what the core attributes that you're looking for. It would be great to have some way of filtering those, and AI is something that is obviously a topic that everyone's talking about for filtering candidates. For us, we've had to index on rubrics for looking at specific qualities within CVs and specific experience that we then is like an immediate put through to then screen the candidate or not. But ultimately, it's getting really, really difficult from our perspective to do that at scale. I don't know what others are seeing.
Yeah, I read the headlines that like Revolut and Deal's, seen like millions of applications for just a few thousand of roles, and I believe it, and I think it's true. I think it represents like a broader general shift across the general population, that tech is becoming a more desirable place to build your career, which is a great thing. But I think if you were to deduce from that hiring is getting easier, it's definitely not. To John's point, I think if you're going after top talent, top 1% talent, something that hasn't changed is that those people still typically find their next opportunity through their networks, or they're tapped on the shoulder. And so whilst there might be the occasional diamond in that volume of applications, I would imagine that most companies are still finding their very best and early hires through other means.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think what hasn't changed is the distribution of sources, which is per hire. So like essentially, when you look at building the company, you always sort of have like a ratio of like 40% referrals, 30% inbound, and then the rest like sourced by your recruiting team. And that ratio really hasn't changed. And I think it's also really important to keep that ratio because you can control the quality of the hire that you do. You can control the timeline. And what's becoming harder is basically for inbound. You're still at the same ratio, around 30% of people who join the company are inbound, but there's a lot more volume there to filter. So it becomes a lot harder to just apply for a job and then getting selected.
I think we're seeing that as well, even for our own roles and people coming to Dex as well. I remember when I worked at Improbable, we were, I think, 0.4 of 1% of applications were successful. I would venture that number is even lower now for most businesses with an equitable bar, which means that the volume of work that you're doing to get that yield is just so much higher. I think the interesting thing for me is we've had people turn up on a call and they don't even know what the role is. They're like, "Oh, who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, hang on a minute. Like, you asked to be here." And so I think that's been an interesting dynamic as well, is that we've seen that volume increase, but that's not all good volume. And I think a lot of that volume isn't actually even real in some regards. So I wonder if you guys must have seen fake candidate. John, I've got to ask, has anyone turned up to an interview with Synthesia with a Synthesia clone? It's got to have happened.
Not with a Synthesia one, but they have with an avatar, which was basically like a 2D, it looked like something from South Park. It was pretty, honestly.
But is that good or bad? I mean, for you guys, that's got to be,
Yeah, it's a moral problem, isn't it? Probably a bad thing. I don't think I'm advocating for people to do that. This avatar that popped up for one of my team is almost insulting how bad it was. We have seen quite a lot of people faking CVs and sending them in and pretending to be that person, and then they'll dial in. And I've had one embarrassing situation where the photo on the CV was completely different to the person that joined the interview, and then you're like, how do I deal with this? Like they were clearly a different ethnicity as well. So I'm like, what do I say here? This is terrible. This is like eggshells. So, but we've had definitely double-digit instances of that in the past, like 6 months, where people have come in and either used avatars or they've put our website into GPT, and we've asked them a question. They've just rattled something off that they think sounds like something we'll really like because they're talking about our company, and that's happening more and more. I don't know if you've seen that.
We had a Russian spy apply.
Nice.
He stays in this room, by the way. Yeah, we cut it.
Any other horror shows in the room? Anyone had anything they want to share? I'm sure there's some crazy stories. I can see some faces. Maybe for after then. Maybe for after. Fascinating. So talking about AI, moving on to kind of like how AI is going to impact our industry. What if any AI are you using in your recruitment processes today? What is working? What isn't working? And what do you want to work? I think that's an important question there. I think there's a lot of people thrusting AI into the process and saying, oh, you should use AI in this way. But actually, as talent leaders operating today, what do you actually wish AI could do that it isn't doing today?
I think for me, I definitely think of my life as like pre-granola and post-granola. And so my post-granola life is much, much richer. So I'd say like granola and note-taking is like by far been the biggest game changer for me. I can just show up to conversations and be more engaged and go deeper and not have to spend the time, worrying about notes. I think that's probably true for the room, I would imagine. Juicebox it's a portfolio company, but I think that's been a game changer for AI assisted sourcing. I also use Willow. I don't know if anyone uses any Willow users in the house. It's like a dictation AI tool. It kind of only works when you're working from home because it's not good for the office, but it enables me to get to inbox zero super quickly. What I think is not working, I don't know if this is more about me or it's the tools available, but I still don't fully trust semantic search in LinkedIn, Recruiter, and other tools that we use, and our in-house tools. And I think maybe it could be a psychological gap because I've just been like trained to, come up through the world of Boolean search and adding search filters on an ATS and just believe that I have like a superior power to find people in a system. But I have not. I think something could be better there.
Natural language search is the answer that no one wanted.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't solve any problems for me.
Yeah. I also wish there was something. I pride myself on being a good matchmaker, but I think as I'm getting older, my faculties are failing me. So I would love something to take the notes that have been recorded in the conversation here, pull out things in a conversation and proactively suggest who that person should meet or a connection I should make to supercharge the matchmaking that we do in these sort of VC talent roles.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question on coming here. I still don't really know, like, I don't think recruiting is any different than any other functions at any companies. I think I'm seeing a little bit that the jobs are changing. And by that, I mean, like, if you think about the ability of a coordinator, for example, to do their job, I think they can do a lot more today by using like any kind of like AI tool. And what this means is that I think the function for them is changing quite a bit, where you could do a lot more with just like one person. And the profile of the person that you hire is also very different than what it used to be traditionally. So that's one change that I'm noticing. There's also all the apps that Zoe is mentioning, but I think this is also kind of applicable to like different functions as well. I don't think that we have cracked how to use AI in recruiting like fully, I'll be honest. I still think there's a lot of jobs and tasks that we do every day that are basically the same as like what it used to be like 10 years ago. And people think that, you know, AI can actually change the game, but it doesn't yet, I'll be very honest. Yeah, those are my observations, I think.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. We use MetaView as a note taker, which we really like. That's been a bit of a game changer for us. And we're exploring ways that we can better tune, because it's a generalist model, so we can better tune with inputs from context from other things. So I think that will be really, really interesting. But I totally agree. I'm sort of slightly cautious about the use of AI in recruiting, actually, because I think it's sold to be something that can be a kind of a solution for almost everything. But actually, really, I just index on it for anything that will save me time, so productivity, and anything that maybe will improve candidate experience, so something that's slicker or easier to do for the candidate or for us. But beyond that point, I'm still like a little bit cautious around like AI is still inherently biased. I realise humans are also inherently biased. So we're replacing a biased thing with a biased thing. That kind of doesn't work for me. So I think there's still a lot to be done. And I hope that even though I'm saying this working for an avatar company, that we don't reach a point where avatars will replace recruiters, because I don't think we're in a current state where you can train a model to be emotionally intelligent, for example, or read a human being. We might get there, who knows? We're in a sci-fi world now, but yeah, I don't think we're there yet.
Just to add on to that, I think in fact the opposite is going to be true. I think we'll spend the next 5 to 10 years doing our most meaningful work, and hopefully our most rich work, because tools save us time. We're allowed to go deeper with candidates. We know more. I just thought of one more on my wish list in case anyone knows a tool they can recommend to me. I would really love something to give me like deep research or deep context on a person before I meet them. So not just the LinkedIn profile, the email thread, but something that pulls from every source online, things they wrote in the past, things they were featured in, questions I might want to ask, interests they might have that I can verify before the meeting, so that I can have a better, higher quality meeting. So if anyone knows a tool that exists, let me know. Otherwise,
have you tried Claude or GPT for that?
Well, I'm like dabbling.
There are a few things that have tried to do it. It's an interesting space for sure. When I think about the AI, obviously we're at Dex, we're kind of bumping into lots of these people who are building different things all the time. And in my previous role, reviewed and assessed a lot of these tools as well as they were coming through. And there are a few main categories I think they break into. One is kind of the note-taking tools, the MetaViews, the granolas, and there are many, many others. Then there are the I'm going to call them outreach tools, but like sourcing and outreach. And then the third category is like the beginning of seeing like these AI interviewers, like these full-blown sort of, no human in the loop candidate speaks to a version of a bot or a chat bot or a sort of a visual model. I'm a bit bearish on all of them. I don't think the answer to hiring is more cold outreach. Like I don't think it was 5 years ago, and I don't think now that the incremental cost to produce an outreach is now basically zero. I don't think that that's the answer that we're all looking for. I don't think that the best talent will submit themselves to be assessed by a robot. I just don't. And then on the note takers, I think that is a valid use case, but it will commoditize. So I think when I look at those three areas, there's a lot of investment going into these areas. I don't know that they make the problem better that we have, and ultimately the problem that we have is the right talent in our pipelines. It doesn't matter what tool you have, what process you have. If the right person isn't there, you're not going to hire the right person.
I agree with this, and I think actually this feels weird to say this on an AI panel, but one thing in answering your question, I think one thing that AI doesn't do is actually the human interactions, and you still win today with human interaction. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and it feels stupid to say this, but like the way that you win is your founder meeting the candidate on the weekend, or like going to a coffee and making sure that like, you fly the candidate to Stockholm, and that's what is gonna win the talent. It's not the AI and the efficiency, so much of like the process and the cold outreach. And so answering your question about like what does AI not do today, I think it's actually the AI interaction. And even though we are in the AI era, I still fundamentally believe that we are people, and the emotional connection that you can have with candidate is what's going to win at the end of the day. And I hope that we don't lose touch of this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. If you're wondering, like, hang on a minute, Paddy's just said that he doesn't think that's going to work. Isn't that what he does? The way that we think about Dex is that we're a tool for the candidate to help them find you. The reality is that candidates don't spend all their day reading TechCrunch looking for like new hot startups. They probably don't know who you are. And so we view Dex as a tool for the candidate to help them think about what they want and then be connected to the right companies. And so we think that's quite a different approach and quite a different proposition. And that's why we think candidates, and that's why we're seeing great candidates use that product. Fantastic. Thank you for those answers, guys. We're seeing a widening, you touched upon it, both of you, earlier. We're seeing a widening gap between, the Lovables, the Synthesias, the fill-in-the-blank, hottest companies in the world, and the rest of the market. And particularly between companies that are sort of AI companies and companies that are maybe more traditional SaaS, or are not sort of cool AI. And maybe this one for you. How can companies that aren't Lovable, aren't Synthesia, aren't these folks, how do they compete?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a huge challenge, especially for companies that are operating in stealth or super early. They just think, how can we compete? The thing I often say to founders is, I think you need to win attention before you win talent, and also remember that that talent doesn't join markets, they join teams. And so when I work with some of our companies that are struggling to fill their pipelines with the type of talent that they want to recruit because they're all being recruited up by Charles and John, I often sit down with them and say, well, let's take a look at what the message you're putting out there into the world. First of all, are you putting anything out there? If not, I think we need to lean into the founder having more of a voice and sharing more of the story around why you're building what you're building, what's the thesis, what version of the future do you believe will exist, because that founder-led signal and that founder-led sort of brand creation, I think, is becoming more and more important in this like noisy world. And so you're competing for the attention and you're trying to grab that attention. But then often when we look at the outreach messages which are designed to be the most effective hook to bring people in and have that first conversation, they're often leading with like the product or the market opportunity or like something commercial. And a Series A stage fintech company that I've just been supporting, when we looked at their outreach, I was like, you haven't mentioned the team once. The team is the reason you would join at this stage. And when we flipped that, they saw almost overnight results from candidates saying, yes, I'll take a call. And so I think it's how do you lead with that narrative around what you're doing and why you're doing it, but also the team that you've assembled to build it, because at the early stages that's pretty much your only differentiator and your most compelling reason to join and take a conversation.
You guys might not want to give away the secrets here.
No, actually I was gonna say like we do lose candidates all the time, and I always tell my team that we have to be very humble. Sure, like the AI companies right now have like a good sort of like momentum, but I don't think it's first of all it's a bubble. We all know this. Second of all, I think we really have to stay humble, because there are companies that have been built for many years that have very good fundamentals. They've been building businesses on a very good business model. They have very good long-term strategy. They have very good technical challenges. And so if we talk about engineering talent today, at the end of the day, the person who's going to join your team and your company is probably also based on like the technical challenge that you offer, and it also based on like the way that you phrase it. And I just don't think that AI is like a really good kind of pool, and the company is like has a really good momentum. But I think we have to also be very anchored on the fundamentals of what it is to build a very long-lasting company, and a lot of candidates would look for that. It's very fragile today. One last word is, I really feel like AI is very fragile. I feel like it's a house of cards. I feel like, we have very good momentum, we're going really fast, and it's all hot and sexy, but we have to be very humble and cautious also about how you build a long-term company. And there are companies that have been doing this for a long time and do this very well.
I agree with that. We lose candidates all the time as well, and it's largely to larger companies that can pay bigger salaries than we can. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the market, though, of risk appetite. So I think we're seeing some candidates who are now open to taking slightly more risks than they perhaps were used to. And I think we're slightly catching up. We haven't caught up with Silicon Valley, but we're catching up with them in the terms of it's become the norm of people to move jobs on a regular basis. It's become the norm for candidates to take slightly more risk, to go to companies where perhaps you don't have stock that immediately vests and you can exercise, for example. And I think people are becoming more comfortable with that. I'm certainly seeing that. But we're also seeing a world where I think candidates just want a certain company on their CV, and they will get that for 2 years, then move to the next thing. So there's an awful lot of conflict going on, and I do agree there's a lot of fragility around the AI space right now. That there's an awful lot of hot air, there's an awful lot of marketing, there's an awful lot of people saying an awful lot of things. But I don't think we've seen like true impact. Certainly not in the talent space, but in a lot of other places we haven't seen true impact of AI yet. And I think that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years for sure. But where it will happen will remain to be seen, I think.
Zoe, I'm curious actually for your portfolio if you're noticing this, but I think maybe one thing that's happening right now where companies could be competing is the different kind of composition that they offer. So like obviously 11 Labs has done secondary. I think, this is probably something that like AI companies are thinking about. Are you seeing more companies offering more liquidity or at least liquidity earlier in the process and having like more investor basically putting money down at like the market value? Are you seeing this at all?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation that's coming up even at the point of joining a company, because I think that's been one of the big challenges in Europe and recruiting in Europe for a long time, is that we haven't had those success stories or enough of them to point to about how equity can become liquid and meaningful. And so I have noticed that there's been this pattern of not promising secondaries, but at least having that conversation as an illustration of how this thing I'm giving you might translate into something of value sooner than you think. So I think we'll see more of that.
I think we're seeing a much more sophisticated market in terms of understanding equity. I think if I think back 10 years ago, we were delivering equity offers and really no one knew what that meant. It was kind of magic beans and, good luck and brilliant, I'm a millionaire. But I think there's a much greater degree of sophistication. I think hand in hand with that comes a greater expectation. I think what's really interesting, Index do a fantastic equity calculator guide, which I'm sure many of the people in the room have seen. If you toggle it between US and UK, there's a massive difference. US candidates expect a lot more, but I think we're catching up. And so, expectations are increasing. There are much more nuanced conversations. Hey, tell me about the prep stack. And, I've had recruiters, get hit with that question by a candidate and they don't know the answer. And you're kind of like, okay. So I think there is a much more literacy. I think there is much more sophistication. I think there is a bigger appetite, which I think is important for us as talent leaders, that we know our shit when it comes to equity. And I think, for a long time I thought I did, and then you get into the weeds of it, and it is a very complex topic. So would encourage you to buddy up with your legal teams to understand that really well, because it's going to get more important. Particularly when you see the deals like Windsurf, and you see these kinds of like strange deals where that actually matters and has a meaningful impact on candidates. They're getting wise to this stuff, so I think we have to be educated.
Yeah, or coming back to that topic of acqui-hiring acquisitions, I think we're seeing candidates ask founders as they're about to join, like, what are the chances we're going to be acquired in 6 months or a year? And I don't know if founders have a good answer to that right now.
We've seen instances where candidates will put into GPT loads of complex questions, or what should I be asking these people? And then they'll basically forward that, and it looks really obvious because you've got M dashes and stuff in there, so they've basically copied and pasted it. So my team's getting bombarded with loads of like valuation questions and equity questions and things like this. And we're thinking like, how does the candidate even know all about this stuff? This is wild. But yeah, it's happening more and more often. I don't know if you're seeing that too.
Yeah, we used to have the trade-off between like cash and then equity, and then often like candidates would pick the cash. This is like shifting so much. I think it's really cool. I think it's like amazing that like we actually are believing a lot more into equity now.
Yeah, Absolutely. Let's come on to that question around acqui-hires, but actually just before we do, you spoke a bit earlier about speed. We've spoken about the competitive nature. What does an interview process at Lovable look like today? And would love to hear that question again for Synthesia. And then so what are you seeing as well? Like, are you seeing processes compress or elongate, etc.?
So for Lovable, a few things just in context. The company is a year old, so we are building kind of like how we think about interviewing still. And up until August, I think mostly it was the hiring managers doing the recruiting. So it was like very distributed across like all the hiring managers, and it wasn't standardized. So we're putting this in place, kind of like how it should be. We rely heavily on back channels. I think I remember talking to Stripe and the executive team, the hiring team on the exec side at Stripe like 3 or 4 years ago, and they were saying that they do a few interviews, but like most of the data points that they get from candidates is from back channels. I think we're getting there, and the reason why is because back channels, you can do this before the candidates even engage with you, and you can get really good data points. And also, quite frankly, I don't feel very comfortable in our own interview process, meaning that like, you know, Google, Meta, they have like years and years of data points, and they know how to interview engineers for 20 years. We are just starting to do it, and I actually think the best data point that you can get is like a very thoughtful back channel. And so we probably, the way that we do it is we bring a candidate on site. Before that, we do tons of back channels, and at the end of the day, we make an offer.
What proportion of, sorry, we're going to dive into like proper deep shop talk here, but like in terms of kind of the number of candidates that come on site, like do you have like a pre-screen process where you have like a recruiter screen or the hiring manager meet them? You know, how many, because if you're doing that much back channeling, how you can't be bringing that many people as a percentage of those people on site, right?
There are 2 tracks. There's the traditional track, which is you apply or you get referred, and then you do the recruiter screen, and then the technical screen, and then on site, and then you get to the debrief and so on. And then there's the, what we call, it's a terrible name, we need to change it, the VIP referral track. And so for that, you qualify as like what we call also the Stockholm experience. So like we would fly you on a Friday with your partner, one and dine. You stay over the weekend, and then you have a nice hotel.
Golden ticket.
Yeah, it's kind of a golden ticket, and it's very unfair. Basically, the VIP referral track and then the non-VIP referral track. But I'm speaking about this track specifically, where you do a bunch of back channels. You bring them on a Friday, and you make an offer on Friday night, and then on Saturday, basically the founder will close.
And that process, you know, if that's working well, assuming, you know, scheduling all the rest of it, what are you turning that around
everything.
in a week, 2 weeks?
No. So like, bring the candidate on site on Friday morning, skip the recruiter screen, skip the technical challenge, do the whole day of interview, just one day, and make the offer at the end of the day.
And sorry, jumping in again, like, you mentioned earlier, like we're losing candidates. Like, I guess in the room as well, are we seeing increased dropped offers? I guess I could show of hands if we've seen like dropped offers increase as a percentage in the last 12 months.
What do you mean by drop offers?
So it's like you've extended an offer, it's been rejected.
Oh, I see.
So like in the room, like if you had increased dropped offers in the last year, would we say? Don't have to out yourself if you don't want to admit it. I remember it was like 90% accepted, right? So like my feeling is that it's increased the number of rejected offers from there.
Just so I can be very clear, like the reason why we do this is because our founder is like, if you don't make an offer at the end of the day, another company would make an offer specifically over the weekend, and then it's too late. You have to make an offer on Friday night or like whenever they come. So that's the reason for it. And that's why I started by saying every company is competition, is because the way he views it is that if we don't get to offer stage and the candidate is qualified, we will lose momentum, we will lose the candidate.
When I joined, we had an average time of hire of about 43 days. It was way too long. So the first thing that we've done is cut that right down to it's 25 days or less across all of our roles, basically. That's the thing that we've pushed for. In tech, it's nothing that like game-changing. We do interview with our recruitment team. What we do, though, is once we pass the candidate through, we give them trial access to our product. So whenever any candidate with us is interviewing, we want them to have played around with our product. We want them to show like genuine interest. And actually, for us, a big plus point is if they've got questions about our product or ideas, how they can potentially improve it. For us, if they show that with an interview, we're like, oh, that's entrepreneurial. We quite like that. They're thinking deeply about the product. We've sort of changed the way that we look at things. So for us, like we index heavily on accountability. So evidence of accountability within their experience, the candidate's experience. And by that I mean somebody that hasn't just been like a small cog in an enormous team. So we've seen huge variance when we've interviewed like a candidate, say from Google, versus a candidate who's been in a scale-up or a startup. And actually for us, 9 times out of 10, the candidates from scale-ups or startups, or with that experience, if they've got that mix with Google, fine, are much more successful with us because they have the ability to adapt. They will join us and there won't be a ton of structure around. Like our founders are very much like anti too much structure. They believe that inhibits decision making. We believe we shouldn't have too many reporting lines. Things should be as flat as possible because every additional reporting line is an additional person that needs an opinion, that needs to have something that they say in a room that makes a decision longer. So we try and cut all of that down. So decisions for us are really, really quick. So we look for evidence that it's maybe like intangible evidence around how quickly you've made decisions, how quickly you've realised that you failed at something and you've iterated and you've gone on to the next thing. And those things are really, really important for us. We do a lot of situational-based interviewing. And then for technical roles, we obviously have technical interviews that we do. We did previously do a take-home test. I've had many a debate with our technical teams about whether take-home or live are the better ways of doing things. We still come to the conclusion that we can't agree. For speed, live is always better than a take-home. In an ideal world, I'd want to offer both because some people work better when they take work away.
Do you trust a take-home now?
Well, that's the other thing. So my first question to our engineers was, how do we know that they're not cheating, basically? Now, we use CoderPad as a tool, which is a nice tool, and they're starting to introduce something where it is a time-based, time-boxed exercise that you can only do within that platform, so that might help. But I still don't trust take-home tests. I'm definitely more on the live side of things. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the theme across our portfolio, especially at the early stages, is as few stages as possible in the hiring process. And it's not to say that the time spent is shortening. I think that especially the live stages are lengthening, actually. We're seeing more and more companies do trial days or even trial weeks where the candidate will take paid holiday from their company and the startup will pay them because it's the best way that they can see that person working in the flesh and seeing, if there's a fit there. And so shorter processes, and I think they're only going to get shorter and faster. I was in SF last week and was hearing some crazy stories of these like weekend hiring sprints where I heard a story that someone was at one startup paid someone $50K just to show up for a coffee on the Friday, and by the Sunday had the offer in their inbox ready to sign. So this is like the world I think we're moving into.
In a world where there are engineers getting 20 million plus, like not the crazy OpenAI folks, but like with 20 million for an engineer in Europe, in London. Yep. We're seeing those, right? Yes. And so, I guess 50K for a coffee is cheap, right? What's the recruitment fee on the 20 million? The coffee bonus. Yeah. Okay, look, guys, we've obviously gone through quite a lot there. Should we try the Slido thing and see some Q&A? I will log into that now and see if we've got some questions in there from the audience. Okay, bear with. This will obviously not work first time because why would it? Okay, great. So we've got a few questions in here. How are Lovable and Synthesia dog fooding their own product in recruitment? Obviously, John, you spoke about it a little bit there. I guess for Lovable, is that like a conscious thing that you're doing? Do you expect candidates to turn up with a Lovable site that they're building?
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about Lovable. I'm personally super excited about it, is the fact that Lovable can be applied in so many different case scenarios. And so you see some crazy stuff from candidates. Like yesterday, there was a video of a candidate that used Lovable for an integrated lead marketing position, and basically the app that he built for this role was insane. And then we've got Lovable on Lovable. So essentially, we want to use Lovable as our own product. So if we go to enterprise and we say that Ford and MasterCard can use Lovable internally, we have to do it as well. So we try to build as much as possible on Lovable. So that's a good way to dog food. And then that's a question that comes every time in the interview process: is how do you you always have to make the product better when you come on site as an engineer or product manager, and you always have to have an opinion about how to improve it. So this would be the three things basically that we do to dog food the product.
Can I ask, do you ask candidate as a standard what they're doing in Lovable, or do you expect them to?
Oh yeah, we check if they have created an account.
Yeah.
It's free, so
Okay.
it's kind of hard to interview for Lovable if you haven't created an account. And then yeah, we definitely kind of like look at how many times they use it, what they've created with it, and yeah.
That's super interesting. I remember interviewing for Revolut ages ago and being asked in the lobby if I had a Revolut account, and being like, yes, of course, because I'd spotted a vending machine in the corner where you could actually create an account there and then. So by the time the interview started, I did have an account. There's a couple of questions in here that kind of all sort of around the same thing. Like, what does like top 1% even mean now? We kind of touched on it a bit earlier, but there's a couple of questions in here. Like, how do you define it for your businesses, and how is that materially different?
It's all marketing. Like seriously, no, it's all marketing. Top 1%. It's all marketing. It doesn't mean anything. So I think what it means is like for your cross-functional partners, your hiring manager, you tell them, yes, we go and we hire top 1%. But really what it means is like understanding like what top talent looks like for your own team, for your own company, and like putting checks in places and like understanding like how a talent would do really well in your environment, in your context, but like everyone is looking for the top 1%, the 0.01%, all this stuff. It's all marketing, in my opinion. It's more about having like a thorough process, defining what good talent and success look like at your company, and then relaying these to your cross-functional partner. That's how I would define it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I sort of hate the whole top 1% argument. I think you'd be better off spending time just working out who are the most successful people in your organisation and what are the things that have gone into, what are the behaviours and what stuff have they done in the past year or two to warrant that success. And then how do we try to take that and...
But what are those things for you guys? I appreciate the 1%. Okay, fine. I heard and agree. What do those people do that is different to the rest of the population that aren't the top talent?
So for us, like I said before, it's accountability. So people that are comfortable taking the lead on something. So we probably actually trend towards hiring slightly more, and this is a whole other debate that's going on at the moment, of more experienced people versus less experienced people, and that's a really interesting trend in the market where people are finding it much harder with less experience to get roles right now. So if I take engineering as an example, we tend to hire senior engineers and upwards, so that would maybe be like 5, 10 plus years experience, and somebody that has been in like a tech lead position. So for us, that's somebody that's basically taken the roadmap, worked with the product manager, and developed something that has then been deployed and has been largely successful within that deployment. So we need like categorical evidence of that. We also need evidence of somebody that like doesn't shy away from doing that. So for us, if somebody is kind of in interview will say, well, these were the steps that were put in front of me and that's what I did, we don't really like that. We would rather be like, well, at what point did you question whether those steps could be improved, or give me an example of when you improved a process or something along those lines. So for us, like critical thinking and the ability to almost like stick your neck out and, you know, oh, this might mess up, but I'm going to try it anyway. Courage is like a really big thing for us as well. So I think those for us lead to being a high performer. I think the days of like you can produce X lines of code are way past us now with things like code generation tools. So productivity has fundamentally changed, in my opinion, certainly within tech. So for us, we're looking for those other attributes.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of like attributes and mindset stuff, and you know, like being obsessive about your craft and mastering your craft. But I actually think, at least Sequoia, what Sequoia pays attention to is it's like super rare for someone to have been on a scaling journey somewhere and have kept up with the growth and the scale. And so actually those people are super interesting to us, the people that were able to evolve at every new material point that company changed. And so that is outlier. And so when I think about what journey has someone been on, I often look for that, especially on the exec side. I don't think it applies to every role, and I think, you know, especially how do you define what top 1% is of the founder in waiting population or former founder population. So I think it doesn't apply to everything, but at least I pay attention to people that have been on those interesting high growth scaling journeys and have kept up.
So really, to summarise, like for you, John, you're talking about behaviours, you're talking about accountability. You know, really, what you're talking about is like the slope of like progression and like how well these people develop and change over time. I guess for Lovable,
Same
is there
attributes of the company?
There's a couple of questions in here which I think is really interesting as well. Is that like, I don't think it's ever been about skills. Like I think, you know, really when you boil it down, the difference between a top performer and not a top performer is how they do what they do. And I think that, I think this is one of my kind of more contentious points when I started Dex, is that like skills-based hiring, I think it's bollocks. I think skills are basically the only thing you can learn, and I also think that all the skills you have right now probably don't matter in 5 years. And so I think, really the most interesting thing to me, and I've worked with many high performers and many high performing teams over my career, is the difference between good and great. It's how they do it, right? It's how quickly they can learn and how quickly they can adapt. So that's my hot take for the day anyway, guys.
It's like the adage, like you can teach skills, but you can't teach attitude at the end of the day, right? So somebody's attitude is their propensity to pick up a new skill. It's not the skill itself.
My learning from today is that I won't be in the top 1% bucket of Zoe because I'm going to cap out of my role and I won't evolve, and so I won't be in that conversation for Zoe. That's my learning.
You're still an outlier, Charles. You're always an outlier.
We've got one or two more here from here, and then there's a couple of hands in the room, and I'll go to, and then I promise we can get back to the coffee. There's a really good question about bias, and I think that your point here around back channels, this is always a topic that splits a room, because you'll speak to some people and they're like, back channels should be illegal. If you do it, you're bad. And then there are people that are like, yeah, we do it. And I think something I've seen really interesting over the last 12 months as the competition has gotten fiercer, as like companies are moving faster, as the risks get bigger, is that what I think 2 or 3 years ago we'd have said around bias and like, fairness and equal processes for everybody and all the rest of it seems to, in most instances, gone out the window. And so there's a couple of questions about like, the golden ticket, how do I get one? I think that's a question I've had 4 times. But ultimately, like, how do we square that? Is a back channel reference? Might be a really long one, so like we probably won't do it justice. But like, is it fair to back channel somebody? How do you trust your sources? How do you even do that? And for the exec search folks in the room, I'm sure you know a lot about this too.
Yeah, I mean, back channeling is like a hallmark of Silicon Valley recruiting. And so, of course, I do a lot of it and we always have done. And I think back channels can be super valuable. I think the risk with back channels and my personal issue with them is that I tend to see, or some founders over rely on them. And so they will want to find the 35th back channel before they make a decision. And I think that is when you run the risk of, one, not trusting your own instincts and your own judgment. You actually don't form any instincts around talent. And two, you're kind of outsourcing the decision to hire to either a bunch of people or the talent partner at a VC, and I don't think that ever makes for a good decision. I think if you keep digging and you keep asking people, you will find bad stuff. And actually, some of the best hires are divisive, and so they wouldn't have had this clean track record. Sometimes that's an anti-signal, and so I think back channels need a lot of nuance, and I think you need to know where to draw the line and form your own judgments and instincts on talent. Is my view on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard today to make a hire without back channeling, to be honest. Like, I would expect every hire manager to own back channel and to at least make like 3 or 4 before they hire. I think back channeling for like the big tech, Google and Meta and so on, it's not as relevant because, like I said, like they have years and years of data points and they have a system and it's proven to work in their ecosystem. But if you are building a company and if you are relying on your own system, that's just not enough, I think, in my opinion.
I'm probably the outlier here. I don't like back channeling at all. So just to be the divisive one, I think it's rife with bias. I think unless you've worked with that individual that's giving you the reference, you don't really know that person. And I think all you're getting really a read on is that person's performance with the other individuals that you're talking to in that very specific situation in that point in time. And people change over time, right? So to me, it's a snapshot, and maybe it's a data point, don't get me wrong, but to me, it's an inherently biased one that's not giving me anything that useful.
Actually, yeah, I would say that is when back channels can be dangerous, when you collect them from people that just observed the person in the building, never worked with them, never worked for them. I think those are the people you don't want to back channel with for sure.
Yeah, it's a really. I've actually come full circle on it. Previously I would never do it. Like I was like actually referencing in general, particularly yes, they worked here from this date to that date. I don't waste my time, and that's why I always think when you outsource referencing, it's like just don't bother doing it. Like, it's just not worth it. If you're going to do a reference, you'd speak to that person and understand it. I think since I've founded a business, I think there is a value, and I have spoken to the founders of the businesses, the people that have come from before. But for me, it's a slightly different thing. It's like, hey, like, is there anything mental I need to know? Like, did they nick the laptop? You know, did anything crazy happen? Okay, fine. And then ultimately, my next question is like, well, how do I set them up to win? Because ultimately, at that point, I want them to do well. Like, I'm not talking to this person because I'm trying to screen them out. I'm trying to set them up to success. And so I think it depends on how you use it. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you're trying to outsource the judgment, I think you're in real bad trouble to start. And I think if you're just looking for reasons to say no, you probably shouldn't be doing that anyway. We've got loads of questions in here. We're not going to be able to get through them all now because otherwise it's just going to get really long. And I'm really sorry for this group over here being blinded by the halo that is emerging behind Zoe. But what we're going to do is we're going to forward the questions onto the panel. We're going to get them to provide some answers, and then we're going to share that after the event with everybody, so that if you have asked a question, if you do want to fire one in now, we'll do our best to make sure it's addressed and shared with you after the event. I think we'll finish on just one last question for each of our panelists. What are you most excited about for talent in 26? And I guess like a prediction for, you know, if we were doing this conversation this time next year, what do we think will be different about what we do? It's a tough one, isn't it? And it wasn't on the list, by the way, as well.
I think something I mentioned earlier, I genuinely am so optimistic about the next decade for people working in talent. And I think there will be, in my head, there's like this new role that will evolve or emerge called like the talent alchemist. And it will be a bunch of people who just have exceptional taste and judgment in identifying outliers, but also developing those people, coaching them, helping them mobilize networks. And I just think we'll be doing the work that we all love to do and wish we could spend more time on, because hopefully AI has, you know, solved all of our productivity issues. And so that won't be the case for everybody. I think you have to be like genuinely intellectually curious about people and understanding talent. But at least for me, that's what I'm excited about in the next decade. One prediction I have, and I don't know if anyone else is seeing kind of trends that point in this direction, is I also think that we will see amongst executive hiring, executive leadership, I think the nature of, you know, finding a seasoned leader. I don't think companies, or at least startups, will hire them as like full-time C-level hires. I think they will hire them as like in the form of residencies or like advisory placements. And so I almost think we will have this like R suite that will emerge over the C-suite, which is like, you know, resident product officer instead of being like a chief of a function. And so I think that dynamic will shift, and they will partner up with the player coach who is, you know, more hands-on. So
yeah, I think it's taken a while for like the talent department in a company to be taken really seriously. Like, it's been a slog, to be honest with you, and it feels like for certainly the last couple of decades it's been seen as very much like a service function. But now I'm really excited to see that actually it becomes a bit more of a partnership function and something that is seen as like a core function within the business. I have a prediction that I think not too dissimilar. Like, I think we'll start seeing like chief talent officers or something like that will be something that will not be too distant in the next few years. I think that will be an exciting thing. And I think actually the newest wave of founders, from what I've seen, are taking talent a lot more seriously perhaps than previous decades, and see that as like a really core part, and a large percentage of their time now is revolves around talent, which I think is super important, because you're only really as good as the sum of your parts, right? So I think that will continue in that vein for the next few years, and is kind of related to what you were saying, but very exciting.
My prediction is that Europe is going to win. I'm so tired of being compared with SF. I mean, I spent like 17 years in SF, and I feel like coming here, you know, all we do is compare with SF, and Europe is seen as like not as good. I think we're playing now in a plain level field where we can compete. I'm super stoked about Europe. I think my prediction is going to be some major winners in Europe. Is going to set a new tone, is going to set a precedent in how we can build companies and how we can succeed here. We already are succeeding, but like at the scale that you see in SF. I'm so tired of being compared to the Bay Area, and I just want Europe to win, and I think we're on path for that, and I'm really optimistic for this.
Fantastic. thank you ever so much, guys. I think this was really, really interesting and great to hear your perspectives and learnings. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been great to have you here this morning. We've got this space for a little while longer, so please do hang about, network, meet old contacts and new ones. And thank you ever so much, and let's have a big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.